This is Richard Wolff from Democracy at Work, responding to another Ask Prof. Wolff question from our Patreon community. And this question comes from J.C. Urbina. And it asks, how might a stateless socialist society have prepared for or handled the pandemic differently than what we have seen? Well, I do not want to present what I advocate for, which is an economic system based on democratic worker cooperatives as the major form of enterprise. I don't want to do that, advocate for that, by pretending that it will not have its own problems, that it will solve everything that goes wrong in capitalism. I don't believe that. I believe it's a better system. I believe we would be better off living with it, but I don't think it would not have its own problems, its own contradictions, its own issues. When I think about this, I'm reminded of something I learned from my students many years ago, that some of them who were single imagined that all their problems would be solved if only they got married. And the married students explained to them patiently, kindly, that if you're single, you have one kind of problem or one set of problems. If you're married, you have another. You have every right to prefer one state to the other, but pretending that one is without problems is neither accurate nor necessary. I feel the same thing about comparing capitalism and socialism and so on. With that in mind, let me suggest what I think a decent non-capitalist society would do in terms of preparing for and containing dangerous threats like those presented by a pandemic, a viral pandemic. Here we go. Number one, since all enterprises that are worker co-ops democratically decide what to do with their net output, that is, their output beyond what they have to use to replace the tools, equipment, machinery, and so on that they used up, and what it takes to pay for the individual worker's wage or salary. Well, the net revenue in a capitalist system accrues to the employer, and the employer decides what to do with it, which usually means distributing it to the people at the top, the major shareholders and the top executives and the board of directors. A tiny minority of the enterprise gets an outsized share of the net revenue. It's their personal property. So, for example, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit the United States, we could have been prepared had we used the money taken by Jeffrey Bezos, had it been allocated not by the capitalist system, namely by Mr. Bezos as head of the company to himself as major shareholder, we would have instead had a democratic decision to do the logical, indeed the obvious thing, to take a portion of the wealth and set it aside as a fund, as a resource, as a store of value and wealth that could be tapped if anything should happen to block or interrupt a significant portion of the normal production of goods and services. Exactly what happened with the virus, the COVID-19. But we didn't have that kind of a wealth at our disposal as a society, because in the capitalist system, it is taken by the people at the top who are in a position of ownership/power to distribute the net revenue to themselves, which they do. So we can't go and get it because we have made it their private property. It was produced by everybody working together, but it became, under the way capitalism is organized, their property. They gave it to themselves, and we permitted that. And so they made the decision not to use it to prepare for the virus. For example, to produce and store masks, ventilators, tests, hospitals, to be ready if a virus, like the one we had in 1918, came. They didn't. And they didn't put in place the teams to go out and do two things: help the people who got the disease and rearrange the schools, the hospitals, the workplaces to be safe in terms of social distancing, mask wearing, and so on. So we failed as a society. Our capitalist system failed to be prepared and failed to contain. And one of the reasons was how we allocated the net revenues, the wealth being created by our system. A worker co-op society would know to behave differently. In an interesting way, it's like going backwards to the so-called primitive people in villages thousands of years ago. They knew to store grain and water and put it aside to deal with their emergencies. That wasn't somebody's private disposition. That was the social need that governed. In that way, I think a worker co-op society would be more likely, no guarantees here, more likely to understand, more institutionally capable, and more institutionally equipped to handle and prepare and contain far better. Indeed, those societies, China, South Korea, New Zealand, Cuba, Vietnam, where the state has a real power to try to do some of this, they did much better than in the United Kingdom and the United States, where we have this laissez-faire notion. We don't want the government to come in. We keep cutting our taxes so the government doesn't have adequate revenue, and then we fail when a crisis comes. This is Richard Wolff for Democracy at Work.